My father has pancreatic cancer, and he doesn't have many more days left on this earth. Well, I thought that we would just spend his last days together and enjoy it. But little did I know, he had a massive surprise for me. Well, turns out I have a new sister. And a new stepmother. Guys, this story is insane. For the third time, I asked the doctor once more, but is there anything we can do? And for the third time, Dr. Marsh shakes his head in disappointment. How long does he have? I asked. Hard to say, a month or two at best. I got to my father's hospital room and sat by his bed as I did for years now, and I decided not to tell him. I wiped my tears on the way as best as I could on the way here and put on what I thought was a convincing smile. You're finally being discharged, I said to him in what I hoped was a convincing tone. We're going home. He said nothing, only held my hand. It's still him. He can still read me like a book. He knows I'm faking hopefulness probably, but he's too gentle to call me out. This thought brought me to have the verge of crying, so I burst into more chatter. And guess what? I'm moving in with you. This should have put a smile on his face, I thought. He's always been asking me to spend more time with him, and was always the happiest when I could put off work and just go with him somewhere. This time, however, he argued against it. Strange that he told me that I don't need to put my life on hold on his account, and that we can hire a dozen nurses just to tend to him, and so on. But as his only daughter, I will not have him handled by uncaring strangers in his last days, however lavish and expensive their services are. Faced with my persistence and determination, he reluctantly agreed. I left the hospital the day devastated. My only solace was that I still have some time left, time to make everything right, do everything he always wanted to do, make up for lost time, so to speak. Once I reached my apartment and felt like the urge to cry was completely exhausted, I called my assistant and told her that I want to be available in person in the upcoming month or two. We made arrangements on how we can handle our work with as little involvement as possible from my part. Once that was taken care of, I spoke to my landlord and explained the situation. The relief that came from knowing that my home and work were in capable hands helped me sleep that night. One last night in my apartment, I woke up early in the morning and left for my father's mansion just to make arrangements for his and my arrival. It's a 2-hour drive, so it allowed me to think hard and long about what needs to be done. The mansion will be in disarray, probably since Father and I were far away for so long. I mean, even though I will be there 24/7, I still need to hire a nurse or two to help with everything. The drive was so peaceful, aside from the few phone calls here and there, and by the time I finally arrived, I was ready. I drove up to the gate, it opens, and the gatekeeper waves at me with a slightly confused, nervous smile. He didn't expect to see me there. As I looked up to the 4-story building ahead, so many good memories bubble up to my mind. How much fun I used to have in these courtyards as a child. How cozy this house used to feel despite its huge size. I still know every corner of it. Here's my favorite hiding spot when I used to bring friends over to play hide and seek. I used to have a tree house somewhere. Nothing but a stump now. Someone removed it, tree and all, and come to think of it, the gardens were very well tended to for a place that was supposedly abandoned for months to even years. As I pull up to the drive place, I have this uneasy feeling. There's 2 cars already parked here and no more cars at that. The expensive kind. These belong to someone rich. 2 someones, in fact, so I picked up my phone. Called Miss Emma, our lifelong housekeeper, and I told her I'm downstairs and asked her who those cars belong to. She said they belonged to Miss Phoebe and her daughter, as if the name should just ring a bell or something. Something's wrong here, I mutter. I hang up the phone and go inside, and Miss Emma's in the main hall, fist on hips with her signature no-nonsense attitude. The house is bustling with activity. She lights up when she glances at me, all hugs and stuff, but I wasn't in the mood for that. After a bit of, "I miss you," and "How long has it been?" I asked about this Phoebe character. Miss Emma's confused I didn't know what it was. She explained to me that this woman has been with my father for a few years now. She visits him here often, and yesterday she moved in along with her 2 daughters to stay here permanently. It all made sense. My father has a secret lover. He never was the type to do such a thing, and he never kept secrets from me, let alone something like this. I started taking apart recent events and piecing them back together in this new light. That's why he was against my moving here. That's why he stopped asking me to come to his house so often. That's why all the arrangements I planned to do were already made and the gardens tended to. She had my treehouse removed. Where's this Phoebe now? I want to talk to her, Miss Emma. Well, Miss Emma tells me she's still asleep and will soon come down for lunch, as she usually does. And I quote you, "Best not disturb her, she gets cranky in the morning." I'm enraged. Who's this woman thinking that she is? 30 minutes I've been here, and already it seems like everyone considers her the owner of the house. They treat me as the intruder. Dang it, I grew up here. I changed from my travel clothes and took a tour around the house. Sure enough, everything's changed to this woman's liking. Servants and cooks give me side glances as I'm going around inspecting everything as if they're not sure whether I'm allowed here or not. One cook even asked me who I was in a tone I didn't particularly like. I lashed out. Poor guy didn't even do anything wrong here. This Phoebe business is getting on my nerves, and the last thing I need now is more strain on my mind. I need to settle this, and I stomp towards the sleeping quarters. Asleep or not, I'll give this woman a piece of my mind right now. As I exit the kitchen, I see something, and, well, then I see someone talking to Miss Emma in the main hall. This must be her. Well, she's a plump woman, in her middle years, 40 perhaps. Not beautiful, maybe, but more like, handsome. They both stop talking once they notice me. So I open my mouth, and to my surprise, she embraces me with this word. "You must be Olivia. I'm so glad to finally meet you." And so on. I'm confused. And in my confusion, all my anger leaked away. Who are you? In short, she told me this absolutely ridiculous story of how her and my father were in love, and she introduced me to my, quote, new sister, as she put it. A 20-year-old who was younger, a less convincing version of the mother. A 17-year-old who didn't even bother pretending and was busy texting the whole time and yawning or examining her fingernails every now and again. She rambled on throughout the meal as I nodded and smiled, all the while trying to keep myself from having her thrown out of, well, my home. And I quote, "Vultures. A lowly manipulator, and her 2 little jerk daughters got their claws in my dad, huh? It's clear as day that her little love story was her fake emotion, and my father was just falling for it. And, oh boy, now they got the news that he only has a little time left to live. Their greed is at its peak. I decided not to do anything hasty. Not until me and father had a talk about this first, and until I get to the full measure of how much power she convinced him just to give her over the rest of us. His life's work, the family fortune, the thought of all this going, well, to this thing. The thought alone makes my blood boil. I have to go to the hospital and bring father here. I snapped. He's already on his way, Phoebe said calmly as a fork halfway to her mouth. Then I'll get some rest, I told her. I needed to get away from that fake motherly attitude and these side looks from the makeup-heavy faces before I did something I might regret. I went to my old room. At least that was one thing left unchanged in the entire house. The room was more or less the same as I do remember it. For a few moments, all I did was pace back and forth, just thinking about everything. Then I picked up my phone. I need to take action. Even if a small one for now. First, I must call my assistant. I gave her the full names of Phoebe and her daughters and asked her to run a small checkup, on their background, of course. Second, I called my lawyer, asked a few questions about inheritance and so on. He assured me that if my father, and she, did not legally marry, she should not be a part of his inheritance unless my father specifically asked for that in his will. Already talking about my father's will while he still lives made me feel filthy, but I had little options. It's better than seeing his life work just be stolen. Yeah, I'm doing this for his sake as much for my own. The lawyer's assurance have given me some relief. I felt like I have some measure of control over the situation. Later in the afternoon, I heard commotion in the courtyard. An ambulance arrived, so I rushed downstairs, and when I got there, my father was walking through the entrance, flanked by 2 male nurses, appointed to stay with him for the next couple of weeks. His face was pale, and his lips were tingling in a bluish color. The sickness and travel have really taken their toll on him. He smiled when he saw me and attempted to stand up straight as to reassure me that he's doing well. For a moment there, I forgot my anger at the secrets he kept and the troubles they put us in, but I was quickly reminded as Phoebe and her eldest daughter rushed past me all feigned concern. Once he was settled into his room, I called the doctor and asked him a few questions. Aside from some dietary restrictions and some medication he must take, he told me that my father should not be overly confined in his movement or denied any ordinary pleasures of life. Since his condition can hardly be improved, it can't be degraded any further either. Just let him enjoy his time. It's what the doctor said eventually. I got to my dad's room for a 4th time. My 4th attempt to start the subject with him. Twice we weren't alone, and once I just wasn't brave enough to say anything about it. He set aside his book when I entered, and once again I opened with reminiscing on the past, and just talking about memories shared in the home. But he sensed the worry behind my idle chat, and he asked if I was worried about him again or if there's something else. This time I told him everything. I told him that I don't trust this woman and that she's obviously doing all of this for greed. She doesn't really love you. She just wants to take away all of your money. Want you? I stopped myself, but it was too late. Listen, I know this is hard for you. My father said and started telling me about how nice and caring she is. He told me that their supposed love story and so on, blah, blah, blah. He finished by telling me that she never asked for anything, just simply to be with him. And how all the things he bought for her or her daughter, that's his decision. I just thought long and hard about all this. And the next few days, I tried to convince myself that my worries were unfounded. Maybe this woman really loved my dad, or maybe she just wanted a comfortable life for her daughters. That's not such an evil thing, is it? I tried my best to avoid any conflicts with her, and that part was easy. She did keep on the motherly attitude, and it helped, however fake it actually was. I even got to spend all the quality time I wanted with my dad, especially since Phoebe and both of her daughters didn't interact with father too much. It all went smooth. Until one night. We were having dinner, nice family dinner, as my father hopefully called it. Honestly, I hated it. I tried to connect with Phoebe and her daughters, but to no avail, and I could not shake the feeling that most of the things he said, and, she said, definitely had some ulterior motive. My dad was happy, so I played along. Tonight, however, as Phoebe was rambling on about how much her daughter loved my dad, she said that the time may be right for us to be a real family, and, she proposed that my father adopted her daughter on his own. And there it was. If they're adopted by my father, both of them and their mother get a share in everything once my father passed. When she was done explaining how they loved him and considered him the best father they ever had, She started talking about how she and they had failed in life and how they might suffer should anything happen to him, which we all know will sooner rather than later. My father was many things, but never stupid. Neither was he emotional. After all, one does not accumulate as much wealth as he did, being either of those two. He nodded, smiled. I kept my mouth shut. I was afraid anything I would say would just turn into an outburst. I take it from the way she talked that they had this conversation before, and from her persistence, it's apparent that her attempts to press the issue have come to nothing in the past. But that was proof enough for me. It's confirmed. Phoebe is as greedy as I thought, and she's after father's money and estates, and I had to do something about it. I called my assistant once more, asking her how her background check went. She found out that Phoebe, previously married, and that her previous marriage was an absolute disaster. She took a lot of legal actions in the past, and she lost a lot of money on lawyers, to the point where she could not support her daughters anymore. Until, suddenly, 4 years ago, all her credit was paid at once. This is around the time she and my father started dating, and from what I gathered so far. From there on, his spending habits spiked dramatically. She also paid off her eldest daughter's student loans all at once, and she's been spending like a queen. More or less, even made a few failed investments. Next up, I asked the servants, housekeepers, chef, everyone around the house, more of the same. Lavish meals were ordered, redecorating the house every time she got bored, and she even bought a fancy car. Twice! Some even hinted that she didn't really take that much care of father, as she pretends to do now, but most were afraid of, her going any deeper. I was afraid myself. I didn't want to be obvious with my investigations. Bottom line, my father is the victim of manipulation, and I'm the only one who could save him from her. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is an utmost insane drama. Could you imagine being in OP's position? I can't wait to see how this plays out. I've compiled every single update I could possibly find. So here we go, update number 1. And guys, if you are new to the channel, just go ahead and click that subscribe button real quick. It does support me a lot, and I really appreciate that. Here is your update. After that dinner, everything was clear to me. Me and Dad have gotten close again, and it's easier for me to raise the issue one more time. I just need to talk to him, I thought, just like we used to. He also listened to me in the past and held my opinion in high regard, even as I was a child. I went to his room and asked him to sit with me on the balcony. He got there with some difficulty. His condition is worsening day by day. I can see it. Once he was settled in, I started the subject. Dad, you're not actually going to do it, are you? He said he didn't know, and he's thinking it over. I felt a stab of fear knowing he even considered this. He told me that he spent a lot of good time with them, Phoebe especially, and that they bonded over the years. They have nothing without him, and they will have a miserable life if he leaves them with zero. I tried to explain to him that this should not be our concern, and that they've been manipulating you all this time just for your money. He said everyone should aspire to a better life, and I should not hold it against them for not wanting to be homeless. I told him I understand that. He should not leave them with nothing, but adopting them, that would give them over half of everything he owned. It's been back and forth like this, and it felt so bad discussing this with him. I must have seemed as greedy as I was trying to convince him they were. That's not how I imagined spending my time with him. All we have is these few precious weeks left, maybe less, and this is how we're gonna spend them, bickering and arguing. But what's at the stake is what I remember, what this greedy woman did and planned, what she'll gain from taking advantage of my father. I can't just let this happen. Finally, he told me that he has not made a decision about this yet. He's still thinking it over. And well, so I let the matter drop for now. The next few days, I avoided talking about this completely. Me and Father did the things we always wanted to. We stayed up late talking about life, playing games of chess, discussing books, and talking about the past. That's what took the bulk of our time, really. Just talking about places and people that were so far behind. Even Phoebe did not open the subject of adopting again. I guess she finally gave up, or she sensed I was on to her, and so the days went by until one morning I was awakened to one of the nurses at my chamber doors. They were telling me my father passed. Update number 2. I'm not sure that there's such a thing as, well, a good funeral, but if there was, my father's funeral was one of them. He lived a rich life, not only in terms of finances. He made friends all over the world. He helped many, was a good employer to hundreds, a good friend to more, and an amazing father to just one. Me. His death was anticipated by us all, and yes, it's true, but it still hit me like a ton of bricks. Since my mother passed when I was very little, he was all the family I ever had, and the way we bonded in this last few months made it that much harder to say goodbye. I found myself at a loss for words. I had to make all the arrangements on my own this time around, since Phoebe has no one she needs to impress anymore. As the people who attended the funeral dispersed and the fog caused by my sadness started to clear, I started paying more attention to her. The less people were in attendance, the less she acted. The veil finally lifted. The game was over for her. Even so, I did not let my disgust get the better of me. My father wished for them to have a nice life after he leaves, and so it shall be. After this is all over, I'll find them new apartments to stay in, and maybe work out a monthly allowance for them to live off of. I could also help them advance their careers, or heck, maybe even start one if they didn't have one already. They played a big role in my father's life, and that makes them, well, the closest thing I have that resembles family. This thought alone made me decide to seek out Phoebe immediately and speak to her. I asked her, and they told me that she went back home, since there was nothing left to do around the cemetery. I took one last look at my father's grave, and I said goodbye to him, and I took myself home. I found Phoebe in the main hallway, all smiles and giggles, not a trace of sadness left in her. That made me mad, but I soldiered on. "How are you feeling?" I asked. She looked at me with contempt I've never seen from her for the first time. "Come to pack up your things, I see." Well, I was confused. I asked her what she meant, and she smirked. "Oh, silly. This house belongs to me now. You need to leave." "Belongs to you? How exactly? This is my father's house." She laughed. "I knew you would try to dissuade him from adopting Hannah and June. The old man tells me everything. Well, told me." Wait a second. I was genuinely scared. How can someone turn so cold so suddenly? With no shame whatsoever, in this painful, nerve-wracking conversation, I found out that my father did indeed adopt his daughter. Her plan worked in spite of everything I did. The mansion, my childhood home, it's hers. She didn't even let me spend the night there. Told me to leave by my own accord or be thrown out. So, I gathered my things in haste and left while her and her daughters eyed me and smiled. Update number 3. Hey guys. Well, this is what it's come to. My father's dead, the house is lost, and I'm thrown out. I won't let it end like this, though. There must be a way to fix this, so I made an appointment with a lawyer to discuss any possible solutions, only to find out that he's been contacted by Phoebe's lawyer already. She's pressing charges. She wants to get her hands on more than she deviled. My lawyer told me that her own is well-known lawyer from New York City, Bill McCarthy, or some such famous lawyer who specializes in these sort of settlements. It's not over yet. She won't stop until she takes absolutely everything. First thing in the morning, I went to the lawyer's office and things did not look promising. She's all in, squandering money, my father's money left and right on big-shot lawyers, having the upper hand on every claim she gets all the necessary papers to back up. Over the span of a year. From a courtroom to another, we went back and forth, case after case lost. She took over $200,000, spending most of it on lawyers just to fuel more charges, just to get more money. What made matters even worse is having this rubbed into my face every time me and her come into contact. She wasn't exactly the graceful type, and it seems she wasn't blind to my efforts to frustrate her back in the mansion. Oh, she still remembers, huh? We didn't see eye to eye. She made a point of smirking every time my eyes met her in the courtroom or another, and said some of the nastiest stuff whenever I was in earshot of her. Over time, the struggle got more and more draining, especially that I have many responsibilities outside of this. Well, she had nothing to do or contemplate aside from this. Ugh, and that's how it ended. Bit by bit, I gave up until she got everything she wanted. As big as my hatred was for her, I couldn't take it anymore. I just wanted it all to end. Just put it behind me and move forward. I didn't want to see her ever again. Even the mentioning of her name made me cringe at this point, and worst of all, the memory of my father was forever tainted by this. Nothing will ever be the same again. I've developed habits that convince myself that this is all right. I mean, after all, it was my father's will, and it was his money to give by the way of manipulation of others. He wanted them to have a good life. I suppose that they have one now. This may be true or false, but it's a way for me to cope. The mental strain is too much, and thoughts such as these help me cope. At least, that's what my therapist says since I started seeing one recently. Update number 4, final post by OP. Well, now that the story is over, I can look back and think, which I do far too often, whose fault it was. Phoebe obviously was the villain here, but could I have prevented this somehow? Maybe my being away from father in my adult years has left him lonely and vulnerable for people like this to take advantage of. That's one of my biggest regrets. Maybe if I was with him, he would not have been so easily manipulated in the first place. Or maybe it's his own fault. All these years, he's been a master of judging people's character and intentions, and then finally letting someone like this trick him, into giving her half of his hard-earned wealth. Maybe he knows her intentions all along, but he still just let it happen, so great was his loneliness. Or maybe our laws are flawed altogether. Someone that old can't be held responsible for so much, and it all takes is just one stroke of a pen to have everything signed away. But still, I tried to push the argument, and the judges had confirmation that my father was in a well enough mental condition to make these kind of decisions. I'm not sure who to blame or what to do from here. It's not easy to move on from all this. All my efforts to ignore Phoebe are in vain. She always finds a way to rub it in my face somehow, especially that we share some assets now. Me and her, and well, we're forced to be in contact on some occasions. This is my story so far. Here I am, with no family. Half of my inheritance taken from me, and I'll never see the house I grew up in again. I don't think I'm alone in this. My guess is many people have had an experience like mine. We forget that people change as they get old, and they need much more care than they're used to. And there are people out there who will simply take advantage of this. When someone's deprived of love and company, they lose their good judgment. I may have lost a lot in this, but I also learned a lot. I'm trying to reach out to my old friends and relatives, even trying to build new relationships and friendships, and who knows? Maybe, one day, I'll have a new family of my own. It was because of this I learned the true value of my closest ones. Well, this story did not exactly have the happy ending that we were probably hoping for. I know I was rooting for OP. Dealing with this just must have been really hard, but it makes me wonder something that OP said about, well, her father and how he just did not understand what he was doing in his final days. Well, a lot of the commenters were saying, hey, it sounded like he was pretty sound body and he knew what he was doing by adopting the daughter and allowing them to take over. That's not what exactly makes me mad. It's the fact that OP was trying to tell her father that these people were seriously just trying to take advantage of him. And sure enough, not even a day after he passes away and the funeral's held, who's acting up? You guessed it. The one that he tried to, well, give everything to, leaving OP stranded with absolutely nothing. So I have to ask you guys this one question. What would you do if you were in OP's position and basically you lost everything in a giant inheritance, drawn-out legal court battle? I would like to know how you would handle that. Me personally, I couldn't even imagine. Guys, my name's Mr. Reddito. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel for daily stories, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.